Welcome to Talking Absolute Worship. We have been hit by the uh, Brexit HGV lorry driver shortage, and so I haven't got a full palette of panelists this week. Fortunately, they bought the quality palette first, and we are blessed to have Rachel and Lithan with us this morning. Um, Rachel's going to go first and give us a steer on how we might preach these readings. What are you thinking, Rachel?
I thought my theme might be it's not all about us. um, so I was mainly focusing on Deuteronomy and Mark, starting in Deuteronomy, because you've got at the beginning the sort of statement that this is the one commandment that's going to enable you to keep all the others that are coming. So it sounds really simple, but I think we often make it really complicated, and we say, you've got to sign up to this and that, and you've got to do this and do that, and I don't know, take your turn on the coffee rotor or whatever, and you've got to believe this and believe that, and it all becomes very quickly much too religious, I think, too churchy, and it sort of then becomes about our efforts and what we can do, and you end up with people doing things because they think that they should, because in some ways that's going to make God pleased with them and all of that kind of stuff. But I think Deuteronomy does actually cut through that and says basically just love God with everything you are and everything you've got, and it's up to you to model this in your life and to teach this way of life to your children. But I think Deuteronomy also acknowledges that we're prone to forget, and we are prone to think that it's all about us and it's all about our efforts to be good, and our efforts to make God pleased. So I think Deuteronomy says, stick up post-it notes wherever you go, put up reminders so that and carry them with you, so that you can see them and be reminded. So I think then Jesus just really reinforces that, because in the same way that in Deuteronomy you've got, this is the one commandment and it's going to help you do all the rest, Jesus gives us two commandments that are equally important and really says the second one is showing you how to make the first one work, and that love needs to be expressed in concrete action. So I read somewhere that because in Mark's gospel, Jesus's reply includes the verse 4 of Deuteronomy. Is it verse 4? I can't remember which verse. Verse 4. Because it includes verse 4 as well as verse 5, then it's kind of saying, this is for a particular audience. So hear, O Israel, for us would be, hear, O church. So it's sort of saying, you're a community that's been brought together by God's liberating activity. So you're this special community, and we're given a command that puts all our relationships in a different light. So I think my focus will be definitely, it's not all about us. In church, we can get really self-absorbed. We can think we're the important ones. We might even think that we're indispensable. But I think these two readings remind us that whatever we do, it's about Jesus, and it's a gift to us. It's not about it's not about transacting God's love. It's about expressing our love for God, in gratitude for what we've received. So that's in a nutshell.
I think you're right, Rachel. There's this kind of it's a kind of a big it's a big, given the connections between Deuteronomy and Mark, it'd be very difficult not to go down to go down that road. And like you, I love the bit in Deuteronomy about strategies for remembering this stuff. Strap it to your wrists and strap it to your forehead and stick it on your gate posts, and somewhere else you stick it as well, isn't it? The doorposts of your house and on your gates. And of course, Orthodox Jews do this, don't they? Lithan and I watched a program. I don't think we finished it. A Netflix series called Stiesel, where they regularly showed us this young Orthodox bloke in the morning and in the evening, strapping on um, the Shema onto his wrist. I don't remember them doing the forehead one quite as much.
I think he did, yeah, the tefillin.
Oh, you're good. Oh, you're
I
good.
know.
And I don't remember seeing the gate posts and the door posts, but
Every time they went in, because
oh,
as I was listening, I was thinking about them every time in the touch, and I was
oh, they
thinking
were.
about,
Oh, that's what they were touching on the doorpost, right? Yeah.
yeah, and I was thinking, does that mean you remember it less? You know, if you're touching, that's what I was thinking when Rachel was talking. If you automatically touch it, do you also pause and remember to love the Lord your God? And that's the idea. Or does it end up just being a touch? Because if it's just touching it, there's no point. But if you are pausing to pray, and I would imagine for many Orthodox people, they do pause and remember to pray, but it's really quick. And I think
Oh,
it's no
yes.
good. It's no good deciding to have these reminders or the post-it notes like the one on the fridge saying, "Don't eat the cake," or if you're not going to pay attention to it, you have to.
Yeah.
You have to make these things do the job they're supposed to, and not just become the rote thing that you do.
Yeah.
Or just don't put the cake in the fridge, Nathan. Just I don't know. I'm watching something which may not be an immediate connection that people make, and I'm watching something called Mayans, which is a sequel to Sons of Anarchy, about motorcycle MCs in America, and their connections with drug cartels and everything. And they do some bad stuff allegedly. But in this particular one in Mayans, there's an old bloke who's a complicated tale, which I won't bore you with. But his wife had been murdered years ago, and he has not all of her, but some of her in this ashes pot. And that's exactly what he does and what his two sons do. Whenever they walk past that place, they'll touch the pot. And many worshippers leaving a Roman Catholic church will just dip the holy water and I I think that in our tradition we've often just shunned these things because we say, oh, they're just superstitious habits that don't mean anything because they just become a habit. But actually, I think we might have lost something by shunning them, and they're very difficult to reintroduce, aren't they? Because then they seem forced. So it's I wonder whether it's too late for the Reformed churches that because we've thrown out the baby with the bathwater, to try and say, oh yeah, there's another way we could do that. And if Neil was here, we'd be sticking it on the fridge, wouldn't we? Obviously, but
Yeah.
I, I, often in churches, I think we come up with schemes, and here's a way to remember stuff, and then it just dies out after a week or so because it's not got that deep-rooted community memory attached to it.
Mm.
But I don't know what you do about that.
Mm.
So yeah, there you go.
And sometimes you need to just encourage people to find their own ways of remembering, don't you? I was, a few years ago, it's probably about 10 years ago, I'd got into a really bad habit of playing a game on my computer, and it was taking up a lot of time. And I'd kind of sit down, to start work, and I think, oh, I'll just do a little, I'll just have a quick go on this. And then you're sort of suddenly, you've lost half an hour. And I was praying, and I did feel one day a real kind of challenge about all this time spent on the computer. So I got one of the many palm crosses that are knocking around in the house, and I blue tacked it to the side of my computer screen. And just seeing it there kind of reminded me of this sort of challenge that I felt. And I've never played the game since. And I don't have the cross there anymore, but for a while I kind of needed that thing there that was oh no, you're going to stop, you're not going to do this. And now I can now I'm not even tempted to go there because enough time has passed. But sometimes you've got to find just whatever it is for you that's going to be the thing to remind you to stop and think about loving God.
It's interesting that you've both gone for examples which are about don't do something. Lithan went for don't eat the cake, and you went for don't play the computer game.
Yeah.
And we need to be reminded not to do bad stuff. Well, I suspect this is being reminded of a sort of deep fundamental truth about who we are and what our relationship to God is.
I've now got to take lots of different medication because I'm old. So there's some I have to take first thing in the morning and then not eat. Then there are some I take when I'm getting dressed, and then there's another one I have to take in the evening. And that is so that kind of feels like the more positive one, but they all have to be by the side of my bed. So, but the morning one I've been taking the longest, and I'm kind of, as soon as I wake up, that's what I do now, because I've managed to ingrain that into my, and that's a more positive one. And I think it's those things that what else can we do along, and that should be then what I should then do, rather than play my game of solitaire that I play first thing in the morning, is go right, and now it's prayer time, or let's just thank God. So there are positive things, and maybe it's about finding those anchors already in your life, that you can add something else to, in a more positive way.
I think there might be something in that, with it, trying to help a congregation think through those things. What have they got in place in their lives that draw them back throughout a busy day? The things that draw them back to God, and have they got stuff like that? And you're right. I think you can't impose them, or you can't make them up for. You can't say do this every day. It's got to fit in with your rhythm. I know I forget to take my tablets if we're on holiday and they're in a different place, or the routine has slightly changed, and I forget to take them. So yeah, there's a lot to be said. I think routine isn't always a bad thing, but we kind of have it in our heads that routine is bad and habits are bad. Although maybe you fake it till you make it, or whatever the phrase is. It doesn't feel right, but as the more you do it, the more it becomes part of your life and takes on a significance. Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, Lithan, where were you going to go with these readings? You were promising us
Well,
Hebrews earlier on.
yes, I'm going to look at Hebrews, because I kind of feel Mark and Deuteronomy are almost the same thing. And I thought, oh, that feels a bit like cheating to do the two, although it is perfectly fine. So I thought, well, I ought to look at Hebrews. So I tend to look at the readings in the New Revised Standard Version. And I thought, I don't understand a word of the, high priest, and not made with hands, and blood of goats and calves, and sprinkling of ashes, and defiled oh, no, I don't understand this at all. Oh no, what am I going to do? And then I thought, why don't I try the thing that I do with Paul, which is to go to the Message and see if that makes it any clearer. And it's brilliant. So in the Message, Peterson puts it like this: when the Messiah arrived, high priest of the superior things of this new covenant, he bypassed the old tent and its trappings in this created world, and went straight into heaven's tent, the true holy place, once and for all, and bypassed the sacrifices of goat and calf blood, using his own blood as the price to set us free once and for all, and so on. And then through the Spirit, Christ offered himself as an unblemished sacrifice, freeing us from all those dead-end efforts to make ourselves respectable, so we can live all out for God. I thought, oh, right. I love that word. He bypasses, or basically he simplifies it. So where before they had this huge temple sacrificial system, if you've done this, you need to have a dove. If you've done this, you need to have a sheep. If you've done this, and then you have to do this, this, and this, and this. And it's like, no, Jesus simplifies it and goes, it's just me. That's all you need is me. You don't need any of that stuff anymore. And so that was my kind of light bulb moment. I thought, so Jesus is simplifying the covenant in the same way that in the Mark reading, he's simplifying how we should live, or what law is important. So that whole keep it simple is kind of my theme then, that we can keep it simple in faith. It's not difficult faith. We as with the law, with Bible knowledge, we kind of rank people, and like me throwing in my show off moment that I knew what to fill in was earlier on, that doesn't make Phil feel better, it just makes me feel better and him feel worse because he couldn't remember the word. That's not what we should be doing. Faith is simple. And I talked recently about Karl Barth when he was asked to, could he explain theology in a nutshell, sang, "Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so." And that's all you need. And so it's kind of,
He did write an awful lot more though, so he wasn't really he wasn't really a man of his word, was he?
well, I guess people didn't want to read the many books of Barth. So now you don't need to, you just need to sing the song. And then it's keeping it simple in living out your faith, because there are two rules. There are two very simple yet not so simple rules. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Although I do sometimes wonder whether there'd be a side issue about, do you love yourself? And to remind people how much they are the best beloved of God. So we might do that. And I also came across a fabulous Martin Luther King quote, which was, "I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. You can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be." And I think that sense of that's what it means to love our neighbours as ourselves is really very profound. And then keeping it simple in sharing faith. And somebody I read pointed out that this is about the only time that scribes aren't seen negatively in Mark. They're usually the ones trying to trick Jesus or trip him up or doing anything. Whereas this scribe is interested. He's heard Jesus and his friends disputing, and he likes the answer, so wants to hear more. And I kind of think that's a good way of thinking about keeping it simple about sharing our faith, is making sure we do take time to talk to those we disagree with, who have faith or don't have faith, and to look for those points of contact together. So Jesus, I guess, knowing who the guy was, because I think you could tell by what they wore who a scribe was, and he finds points of reference that will help them find the things they have in common together, those points of agreement. And then it's the time to bring in one of Phil's favourite quotes, which is from 1 Peter, "Always be ready to give an answer to everyone who asks you, to give the reason for the hope you have." That we should always be ready to enter into dialogue with people, to share our faith in conversations. So we have to, and keeping it simple then is the right answer to doing that. And in 1 Peter also then goes on to say, you do this with gentleness and respect. And it's not about point scoring. It's about finding those ways to I love that, gently share the faith that you have. And that actually, again, keeps it simple. You don't have to be, learned. You just have to say, I know God's love has made a profound difference in my life. And you don't even have to go on and say, and it could for yours, because that's not necessarily respecting their point of view, but just saying God's love has made a profound difference in my life. And hopefully, if you are loving God with all you are and loving your neighbour as yourself, people will see that anyway. So that's where I'm going.
Yeah, Rachel.
And I like the fact that Jesus encourages the scribe as well at the end, and he kind of says, "Oh, you're going in the right direction," and it's quite sort of affirming. And when I think sometimes we forget about those little words of encouragement as well, don't we? And just saying something that almost offers an assurance that you're doing okay. I think I liked that. And also when you were talking, Lithan, about the Hebrews, it kind of made me, because I've had a bit of an issue with Hebrews in the last few weeks, so I didn't really want to go there today. But just the idea that actually it's a gift gift. Jesus has done it all, and it's a gift, and it's not about us trying too hard to score the points that we need, but just accepting the gift. I like that.
It's quite. I think it's quite difficult to grasp fully what a catastrophic challenge to the religious authorities and system that actually was to say that. And obviously, it resulted in Jesus' death. I mean, if we're looking for reasons why Jesus was crucified, here we are. I mean, the Peterson translation uses the phrase bypassed. No religious authorities like to be bypassed by someone saying you don't need any of that now. Forget about all that stuff. So it's not difficult. I found myself sort of vaguely wondering what kind of equivalent challenge Jesus might make to our edifice of church structures and the tangled web we put in people's way, which I'm sure he would just cut straight through. But I'm just wondering what the equivalent is. Lithan.
Well, I was just thinking that's kind of the whole thing that we're wrestling with right now, isn't it? Where suddenly Zoom has bypassed being together in church, and we're struggling to have people coming back into the building and being together. And yes, maybe Jesus would say, let's bypass the institution of the URC or the Methodist Church altogether. You don't need any of that stuff just to be a Christian. And for those of us who are in ministry, we can't say that. But maybe we need to just have a think about that too. Or certainly how much do we need church buildings, which is something I'm challenging with people with at the moment. How much of our life is spent as a churches propping up the building that we have? Wouldn't it be better if we didn't have one and we're able to use all that time in mission? Which is easier said than done, but I think that challenge probably is as tough to listen to as to say, let's get rid of temple sacrifice. Let's get rid of our temples, if you like.
Or slightly tougher. Do we need paid ministers of word and sacrament? Which is a more personal challenge. And and the answer is yes, we do until I retire. But then that's exactly what Mark's talking, and particularly next week Mark goes on to say about money and the church and what props it up and what keeps it going is self-interest and money and power. That's why they need to keep it propped up, because that's what gives them their status and everything else. So yeah, I wouldn't be the one to stand up at General Assembly and say, yeah, it's time to scrap stipendiary ministry. We've had enough. Jesus has bypassed it, and is bypassing it with all sorts of new movements and new things that are happening in the world, because I suspect it wouldn't go down that well. Plus, nobody's invited me, so I wouldn't be saying that. I found myself in a little bit of a rabbit hole, in that. Sorry, I'll come back to you, Rachel. What you were going to add to that?
I was just going to say, most of the ministers I know, we're all just trying to be kind of good disciples, and we're trying to be good followers ourselves and hope that we can encourage other people to be good followers. But sometimes I wonder if we are viewed more like the kind of high priest, in that a certain amount of stuff is sort of, a certain amount of personal responsibility is abdicated in order for us to hold the roles that we do. And so perhaps it wouldn't be a bad thing if we didn't have church leaders in the same way, in the same way that people will employ a children's worker, and then no one has to do children's work because you've got one person to do it. And I feel like we're on that sort of thing all the time in church life. Oh, there's someone paid to do that job, so therefore we don't need to. So maybe it would be a good thing to rethink.
Yeah, in 11 years' time, that's probably the time to ask the question. Yeah.
20.
just to pluck a figure out of the air. Yeah, no, I think there is something serious in there, and I keep trying not to think about it too much. But if the gospel isn't supposed to be challenging, then what is it supposed to be? Um, I found myself down a little rabbit hole. I don't think either of you can help me with this. But Deuteronomy, when I read it, says you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. That's three things. Okay. Jesus' version, he says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And he adds mind in that
Mm.
wasn't there in the Deuteronomy one. Oh, something weird happened. My fingers then, they disappeared. Where? My
Ooh.
fingers disappeared. And I thought, well, I don't know what's going on there, whether Jesus has just misremembered it or whether he's deliberately added a word in. So I don't think it's important. But I found myself looking at those words a bit, and I was interested by a commentator who said this word soul is an interesting one because I think we have this weird, spooky idea of what the soul is now about some kind of disembodied, non-corporeal essence of being that's difficult to pinpoint. I didn't really have that idea back then of this duality of a soul and a body. And soul, he was suggesting, was better translated as your life. To love the Lord your God with your life, which kind of then makes all the words just mold together, doesn't it? Whether there's any difference between loving God with all your strength or loving God with all your heart. And again, heart. This loving God here isn't an emotional thing. But the word used isn't to do with emotional love. It's to do with, some say, the word was used in treaties between nations, that you would promise to love the king of the dominant nation, by which uh, they would mean you would be loyal, you would work for them, you would fight for them, you would support them, and all of those things, which is an act of will, rather than an act of emotion, because you can't be commanded to have an emotion towards someone, can you? It can't be a commandment to fall in love. This isn't falling in love with God. Um, Although then it mentions the heart, you see, which then thinks, that means it's that kind of love. So I found myself going round and round in circles with that, and wondering how on earth that would even mean anything or be helpful to anyone. And I'm not sure I've come to the end of that one, but I might persist with it. Yeah, Rachel.
I think I don't know the answer, but I think I read somewhere once upon a time that the kind of stomach felt that in the sort of ancient world, the stomach was the sort of seat of the emotions, because that's where you do feel things, isn't it? You know, if you're excited, you feel it in your stomach. If you're scared, you feel it in your stomach. So, but I can't remember what they said about heart and what that did signify. Because for us, as you said, Phil, it's, you know, we think of it as being an emotional thing, but I don't think it was in the sort of more ancient world. But I do like the addition of mind in there as well, because there's a lot to think about and get your head around when you become a Christian, and it's simple, as Lithan said, but it's also kind of challenging and not always simple to actually try and, well, it's about changing our mind, isn't it? I suppose that, you know, we've got used to looking after ourselves perhaps, and thinking that, you know, we can help other people, but only when we've sorted out, you know, only when we're comfortable. And it's about kind of retraining our mind to think differently, to respond differently, to understand differently. So I do like the way that Jesus stuck mind in for the eagle-eyed.
Yeah, well, I don't know if he did, because it seems a bit weird. I mean, the people in the New Testament are always misquoting Hebrew scriptures, aren't they? Or taking bits out of context. And to find Jesus doing it is a bit strange. I don't, maybe there's another version or something that he'd heard, but you'd think this is such a central text to the people of Israel that you would think he wouldn't have misheard it, or I've added a word to it, but I don't know. And nobody seems to have picked him up on it. The scribe said, "Hang on, there was no mind in there, Jesus. What are you doing?" But I do love, as Lithan pointed out, that this is we're kind of expecting the scribe. It's a bit like the rich young ruler. We're expecting it to be that kind of encounter, aren't we? And the scribe says, "Oh yes, yes, that's." And Jesus then is going to say something cutting and says, "Yeah, but have you thought about this?" But actually, no. As Rachel said, Jesus encourages, "Yeah, you're doing the right thing, mate. Crack on, keep it up." And you think, "Oh, I was expecting an encounter," because all the other encounters with scribes and Pharisees in Mark are negative, argumentative encounters where they go away to plot. But this one isn't. I think, oh, great! It's just fantastic, isn't it, to have just to counter that that horrible um, emphasis that the church has had on for centuries of vilifying, um, well, Israel's religion. Basically, that's what preachers have dined out on it for 200 years, haven't they? You know, yours was all rubbish and Jesus made it better. Well, to have Jesus praising the Levites, saying, "Yeah, you get it, mate," and from within your own system, you get it. From within um, Judaism, you get it, and that's great, and you're doing it right. Um, I think is a real um, important counterbalance to what the church has done with these stories in the past. Um, Israel's religion bad, Christianity good, which has just been so incalculably damaging over the centuries. So you could go down that track, but maybe that's probably not the best and most fruitful track to go down. But it's there, isn't it? And it's a useful counterbalance. So there's more stuff to do than just preach, thankfully. But there's certainly two threads to go down there. Keep it simple, or it's not about us. There's a couple of possible sermon titles. But as for the rest of worship, what were you thinking about, Rachel?
Well, I was thinking that if it's not all about us, then you can actually frame the whole of that period of worship around that, because people do get hung up on, well, I don't like that song, you know, and or you did that and I didn't like that. And people can be very kind of sort of consumerist about what's on offer. So it would be a good opportunity to remind people that we're not here just for what we might be getting out of it. That the focus of worship is not our own needs or wants, but that God is always the focus of our worship. And there's loads of songs that you could choose that say something about it not being all about us. So probably, you can take your pick with those. But I thought we could have a craft fest as well. I thought that I probably wouldn't wrap it on too long, but that there'd just be, in my mind, there'd just be like millions of craft activities available in the church sort of sanctuary. And just send people off to do stuff. So you could have like beads and jewelry making stuff, and you could have stuff to make a picture, or you can get these wooden hearts that you can embellish and draw on, or you could write out a Bible passage and colour it in, or you could do all sorts of things. But with the focus that this, whatever it is you're making, is going to be your kind of reminder about loving God. So if you wear lots of jewelry, then I don't know, make a bracelet where the beads represent like some of those key words, or make something that you can hang up by your front door. But whatever you make, it's going to be like a reminder, and get people to reflect on what Jesus said and our response to that while they're doing the making. Maybe get them to talk to one another around the craft tables, and to get them to think about, when did you last talk to your children about this? That might be a good question to ask. When did you last talk to your children about this? And is that something maybe that you could do today? I don't know.
Go home and do it now.
Mm.
With that, yeah, that's a challenge, isn't it? I always think about the doorposts. The only time I think my churches have ever written anything on their doorposts is when we do the New Year thing with the three three wise men letters and the blessing of the house thing. So I'm wondering if there might be something there that you could do with people's houses, or with their gates or their doorposts. What would you write on them? or what would you hang on them, or to remind you? I don't know. So a big craft festival, um, in Rachel's church. What would you be up to, Lithan?
I'm just saying, I love that. I've just written it down for the church that I'm going to. We'll be doing, may not be a craft fest, but a craftish. But,
Yeah.
but I think we'll definitely do something crafty. It's so long since I've done this. Let's see if I can share screen.
Don't forget
Sound.
to
We're all
talk
getting
to us.
Zooms like so
While you're doing
yesterday.
I know, and then find. I think that's what I want to share. We'll start here. So, I haven't done slideshow. There we go from beginning. So, this is it's an earworm. So I do apologize, but it's a version of Love the Lord Your God that we've done at my church, and you can do actions if you're actiony people. But what I think the beauty of it is, it repeats so much that people will be singing it afterwards. So you may not like the tune, but you'll be stuck with it. So I'll play just a little bit of it now.
Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. With all your heart, with all your soul.
That's enough. That gives you the idea, because it goes on and on and on and on and on. But it is. I've been humming it all day, and it's quite useful to just have that as a thing that's in your head. There we go. And then, if you're thinking about being simple, this is a lovely one to sing.
Tis a gift to be simple, tis a gift to be free, tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we get to the place that's right, we'll be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shall not be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right.
Now, number one, what are those instruments? Is one of them a zither? I don't know what the
No
little one
idea.
is, but anyway, so there's that. Number two, thinking back to when we were in college, that it's actually a shaker song, and I think it's a circle song that you're supposed to do a circle dance to.
Mm.
So if you have that kind of a congregation or a big space, you could also not only sing it, but kind of do a little circle dance. And in fact, if we're still singing with masks on, I think a socially distanced circle dance could really help to inhabit the music. And then finally, I'm going to play some little bits of Alan's Big Scary Teeth. So this is a kid's book called Alan's Big Scary Teeth. And Alan is an alligator. Yeah, he's an alligator who loves to scare everyone with his big scary teeth. And that's who he is. His purpose is to scare people with his teeth until he loses his teeth. And then he struggles with his identity. And and as a result, he learns to love and be part of the community. So I'll play little snippets. It doesn't mean I've got to fast forward, so you might want to shut your eyes while I'm doing that, because it's a bit disorientating. And the best thing is, it's read by a British person. Yay, because so often they're American. So here's some little bits.
Alan's Big Scary Teeth by Jarvis. Alan came from a long line of very scary alligators. He was known throughout the jungle for his scaring. It was what he did best. Alan would start each day polishing his scales, sharpening his nails, and brushing each of his big, scary teeth for at least 10 minutes at a time. And after practicing his frightening faces in the mirror, grrr, 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 he'd sneak into the jungle for I love being scary, laughed Alan. After maybe no one would notice. Could he still be scary without them? He decided to head into the jungle as usual. He made the frogs leap off their lily pads, the monkeys tumble from the trees, and the parrots screech.
That'll do, but it's extremely entertaining. But I also think there's quite a good point about, you know, that we're here to love, and what is it that gets in the way? Is it our big scary teeth? And actually, sometimes in losing things, we gain so much more. Although his friends do find his teeth and allow him to have them back as long as he helps everyone in the end.
Well, I've never come across that before. That's cracking. All right. I've got a couple of things that I found. I'm going to share. I'm sharing a Canva presentation, which I've not done before, because I didn't realize that Canva do presentations as well. So there you go. So this is a Canva presentation. Prepare to be amazed. I don't know if I need the sound or not. Maybe I do. Right. Nothing lost if I don't. Let's move that window.
Oh,
Yeah, look. I thought we could play with heart, soul, mind, and strength, and I wondered if maybe there was some mileage in getting people to fill in the blanks. I love God with all my heart when I and try to emphasize the idea that it's about how we act. I don't know if there's any mileage in that. I love God with all my strength when I move all the chairs for Sunday morning, or although I think I'd rather go with strength being when times are tough and I hang in there. It's not just about physical strength, is it? And doing like strongman things to do. Strength is about maintaining our faith through difficult times. And mind is about, I think, probably making decisions. You know, whenever I make choices and decisions, I may be loving God. Soul is a bit of a tricky one, isn't it? But if we substituted life for soul, you might get some answers for that. So yeah, you can see how that works. The other thing, I thought it would just be quite interesting and I think powerful. And this is how I know how to pronounce it: Shema, not the Shema as I was doing yesterday. Just to listen to an Orthodox Jew reading the Shema, telling us how to say the prayer. So it goes on for 8 minutes, and I just think I might play the whole of this because it is such a fundamental part of how their spiritual life works.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Mikey Stein. This is Shema and the first paragraph of Ve'ahavta. Shema is the quintessential Jewish declaration of faith in God. It's traditionally said with the hands covering the eyes. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. The next line is said quietly, Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. And then the next paragraph, the V'ahavta paragraph, which talks about the requirement of loving God, begins and is read in the same manner that we read from the Torah. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol meodecha v'hayu hadivarim ha'ele.
So that's the part that we've done. The Shema is actually is much longer than this Deuteronomy bit because it's got other bits from Leviticus and elsewhere. But I just think it would be not an eye opener, but just really interesting for people to see what that looks like in Jewish spiritual life. And finally, talking about having this strapped to your wrist. I thought it was unrealistic to expect people to tie little boxes on with cords morning and evening, and perhaps disrespectful if we weren't doing it properly. So I had a look on Amazon, as you do. I was thinking about having this strapped to our wrist, and another way of strapping something on your wrist is to have a wristband, and you can buy these from all over the place. There's 10 here for £6. That's like 60p per wristband. If you had a small congregation, that's easy, isn't it? You could buy enough for the whole congregation, and they could wear the wristband that have in Hebrew, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one." Although I think also the other thing I noticed in the translations is some of the translations have "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone." And there's a discrepancy between the translations. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one," and "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone." And there's discussion between experts about which of those is more correct, and I think it's unresolved. But it's really a discussion as to whether this is talking about the nature of God. This is a statement about who God is. God is one. Or whether this is a statement about the exclusivity or the loyalty of the followers. In other words, we are loving God and only God, or only this God, because in those days there was a panoply of gods, wasn't there? So and there might be some mileage in teasing that out, saying actually, saying this statement, you might be saying both things. You might be saying something about who God is, but you might also be saying something that as a people, we're called to serve God and only God. Nothing else should compete with God in our lives for that level of love and devotion and loyalty. And I kind of think that's the first time I've seen that. I've always only ever seen the Lord our God is one, and I think it's the New Revised Standard Version goes with "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone."
Mm.
You'd hope the New Revised Standard Version translators had some basis for writing that. Their expertise is well beyond mine. So I thought that was just a really interesting translation, and I really like that. It kind of means something more to me rather than just being a kind of an ontological nature of God statement that I think, well, and how does that change anything in my life? So yeah, we've got craft fair, we've got stuff to watch, we've got earworms, and we've got a fantastic story about a crocodile or an alligator, one of those two. And we've got several themes for preaching. Is there anything else that has occurred to anyone before I hit the end button? No. In which case, we want to dedicate you to the task of preaching these texts, of bringing them alive in the context where you serve, in the congregations where you minister, so that the words touch the lives of your members and friends. And Lithan is going to pray for us as we set about that task.
Loving God, you are our God, our Lord alone. So help us in this task of preaching and worship leading, to find ways in which to encourage and enable our congregations to love you with all their heart and soul and mind and strength, to love their neighbours and to love themselves with that deep love that you offer to us through Jesus, in whose name we pray. Amen.
Amen.